Hey guys, today I'm gonna do my reading statistics for 2017. So as last year, I used a wonderful spreadsheet to track all of my reading. This year, I also tracked all of my acquisitions. So we're just gonna look at some statistics of 2017. And yeah, we're just gonna get into it. Once again, I wanna start with Goodreads. I don't really use Goodreads for any kind of stats, but because I've been using it for a couple of years now, it's just really nice to compare years on there. So I did that last year and I'm gonna do it again this year. And I just wanna look at the pages, and this year was so intense. I just absolutely cannot believe it. I don't know how I managed to read so many pages. I mean, I did read 50 more books than I usually do, but I just did not expect that a lot of it was also more pages. I know I read many audiobooks and I can't believe it. And my goal was kind of to read more pages than I did last year. The fact that I read 10,000 more is just absolutely unbelievable to me. So as always, there is a little bit of a difference between Goodreads and my stats are definitely more accurate. So my actual page count was 29,445, but I DNF'd so many books in 2017 that if you would add all of the DNF pages, I would be at 30,922. So that's even more than my Goodreads goal, which is just insane. So overall, I read 120 books. 20 were hardcovers, 17 were paperbacks, 44 were ebooks, 33 were audiobooks, and then I had 6 library bindings. And I know that's not really its own format, but I just kind of wanted to have my kind of own library section in the format section. So I think this was the first year where I read more digital books than physical books, also a lot due to the audiobooks. So 43 books were physical and 77 were digital. I think last year it was like around 50-50. This time an obvious difference between the two. Now let's look at the genres. This was a really contemporary heavy year. I still mostly read fantasy, that's definitely the biggest chunk, but I read 22 contemporaries, and these are just like the fluffy romancy contemporaries. I think if I would add like thrillers to it, there would probably be even more. So this really was a contemporary heavy year for me, and I really just kind of rediscovered this genre for me. I'm really happy. There were so many amazing books that I read. I'm sure that fantasy is gonna always be the biggest genre, but I do think that contemporary will probably always be second place from now on. I think a few other surprising kind of numbers are just 4 dystopians, which I did not expect, just 3 kind of plain old romances, 11 science fiction is pretty high, and then also 7 nonfiction and 8 memoirs is like the highest number of nonfiction books I've ever read. As always, I like to compare the number of books to the pages in each genre. Not surprising that fantasy is huge. I read more than 10,000 pages of fantasy books, which is a third. It's not surprising because most of the time they have a lot of pages as they are. But then also here, contemporary is the second biggest one with 6,905. And then everything else is kind of in the same range. And then I'm actually surprised to see that almost a fourth of what I read was adult. I thought that would be a smaller number, but I guess because I read some adult fantasy and especially thrillers, I think these are probably the biggest parts that kind of made up for a fourth adult. I was really surprised. Obviously, really small amount of new adult and then mostly YA. Now, for the first time, I also looked at publishers this year, and I didn't invest like a huge amount of time in it. I mostly just went for the kind of parent companies. I did not put in all of the imprints, but that's obviously also led to it being like very clearly that there are, 4 publishers that are kind of the ones that I read the most, maybe 5, but yeah, obviously you can see HarperCollins is the biggest one, not very surprising. Also Macmillan, not very surprising because it has a lot of imprints that I really, really love. Also Penguin, not surprising with all of its imprints. And then I feel like even Hachette and Simon & Schuster are not very surprising. There's even a couple of publishers you will see here that I didn't read anything from. That's because I added these for the acquisitions. So these are not in the reading stats, but I did buy books from these publishers. And then we have books read by month, which I also always really, really like to look at. We can see June is the biggest month, and I think August and December were like the worst months, although I think December was the worst month, as you can see in the pages read by month. Oh, damn. August was actually even less pages than December. I did not expect that. I think for the most part, it's also not very surprising. I think the only one that's kind of surprising is March, where I read 9 books, but then this is the second most amount of pages that I read. But other than that, I think for the most part, it's kind of on a similar vein. Obviously, July stands out as the one with the most amount of pages. That is mostly thanks to Booktubeathon, but in general, just really nice to look at, to see that in any month this year, I did not read less than 4 books is absolutely amazing to me. Thank God for Overdrive and audiobooks. Then the average page length, also not very surprising. The highest one is 300 to 399, and then the second one is 400 to 499. These are kind of my preferred length of books anyway, so that's really a perfect representation of that. A couple of bigger ones and then obviously more small ones, because I do like to read graphic novels or novellas, so very kind of standard for me. And then the star ratings. This year, what I did is that I did not rate my rereads, which is what I did last year, and it completely fucked up my kind of average star rating. So this year I did not do that. I did not rate my rereads because, you know, they are already somewhere in my statistics. So as you can see, 4 stars is the biggest category, then it's 3 stars, then it's 5 stars, then it's 2 stars, then it's 1 stars. I'm just leaving out the 0.5 because whatever. I did read a lot of like kind of average, okay, solid books. I think a lot of that is due to the fact that I had access to Overdrive and just listened to books that I would normally not listen to or that I would never in a million years buy. But if I have like almost free access to them on a platform, why not listen to them? I think that's kind of where the high amount of 3-star ratings is coming from. But overall, I'm very, very happy with my ratings throughout the year. I had an average star rating of 3.41 stars. So honestly, sounds perfectly good to me. I think this also might have been the year where I read the most standalones. 41% of the books that I read were part of a series and 59% were standalones. I think I normally tend to read more series, but I think it also has to do with the fact that I just read a lot of contemporaries. So this is kind of how I got my books that I read this year. More than a third of it was library. This is both Overdrive and physical books that I got from the library, but here you can see how much Overdrive influenced my reading this year. Just amazing. Then we have almost a fourth is new books, lots of new releases. I think the second category then is actually ARCs. I had an amazing year with ARCs. I was accepted for so many. I was so happy. It's such a special thing, especially as an international reader. I quickly just want to take a look at acquisitions. I have to say I bought a shit ton of books. You will have seen it in my hauls. But I do want to mention that all of the books that I got from whatever, like ARCs, library, everything is in there. Not only books that I bought, I read 53%. And I think that's actually a really, really great number. I read more than half of what I got this year. I think that's amazing. So as you can see, the kind of genre is basically the same as what I read, mostly fantasy, then contemporary, and I bought a lot of historic fiction compared to what I read. Then we have location, which I find really, really interesting. The biggest one is Medimobs, which is the site that I use for most of my used books. Then we have Amazon. A lot of this is just the ebooks that I buy. Overdrive, obviously. Thalia is basically the Barnes & Noble or Waterstones of Germany. They also have a reward points system, so I buy quite a lot there to get reward points or to use the reward points. And then we have NetGalley. Edelweiss basically being the same, although I get accepted for way more in Edelweiss, surprisingly. Then I love this one. You can see that over half of the books that I got this year were free. Now, this does mean gift cards as well. I get a couple of gift cards every year from this kind of company where I do polls, and then obviously all of the ARCs and all of the library stuff. But like seeing that makes me feel so much better about the kind of book buying that I did this year. Anyway, so these were my stats for 2017. A lot of information, but I just always love looking at them. And I know that there's a couple of nerds out there who also really enjoy it. So I just have a lot of fun looking back at these as well. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I guess I'll see you soon. Bye!